Behold the distant future. Yep, humans have successfully colonized Mars and the Moon. Problems with overpopulation and hunger on Earth are solved. But soon, a new threat looms over our planets, and the Moon. Anyway, scientists have figured out that in 150 years, the Sun will explode and destroy our entire solar system. Bummer. There's enough time to build a fleet of huge spaceships and evacuate everyone. But it's not enough time to come up with some sort of sci-fi space jump. It's been a long time since people found a new, potentially livable planet, and the nearest one's a several million years ride away. There's no other choice. Humankind is evacuated into gargantuan spaceships, and the infinitely long voyage begins. A few decades pass. We leave the solar system and watch our sun explode. A huge flash and that's it. There's no more light. Just small, faraway stars and the infinite black depths of space. All ships are on a synced autopilot that won't go off course no matter what. Even if everyone on board were to disappear, the ship would still arrive at its destination. So, the upside, humans will survive for millions more years. The downside? Because of all of that time spent on space transports, will look different, totally different. Ships arriving to the new planet will be populated with shapeless, pulsating biomasses sitting inside metal exoskeletons. Here's how it happens. Bones in space get weaker, so do muscles. There's no gravity, so your body's not under any sort of pressure to keep it running properly. Astronauts on the International Space Station do a lot of exercise to stop their muscles from withering away. Back to the story. There are gyms and special machines that recreate gravity on every space transport. But to save energy, they're only plugged in a couple of hours per day. Unfortunately, no matter how hard people exercise, in space it just won't be enough. After the first 100 years, human bones have become so brittle that anything remotely physical can lead to injury. After another 100 years, people lose the ability to stand up on their two legs. But it's not only because of weak bones. After all those years in zero gravity, the human body's already changed a lot. A big problem is that people lose their sense of balance. If you try to stand up, you'll just fall. The ship's captains dismantled the gravity machines. They weren't working anyways. And all the sports equipment on board got taken apart ages ago and used as spare parts for the ships. The lack of gravity didn't just make people weaker, it also made them taller. The spine needs gravity to keep it stable, and now all those backbone discs have stretched themselves out. Humans are starting to look like blow-up toys. Everyone's given mechanical arms and legs. You just strap them on and get to work. Servicing the engine, cleaning out the bedrooms, throwing trash out into space, lifting anything. Not happening without those mechanical arms and legs. Time passes, and people become more helpless. Luckily, the mechanical bodysuits keep getting better and better. Since the sun collapsed in on itself, human eyes have been having a hard time. Inside the ships, the sun is replaced by special artificial light that also gives off vitamin D. Since there's way less light overall, people's pupils become wider. Then, after a few more centuries, their vision really starts going downhill. But this problem is solved by technology. Artificial lenses magnify light and keep humans from going completely blind. The ships get disinfected every single day. That stops bacteria and microbes from multiplying. But it also means that the human immune system doesn't have to fight off any diseases. Pretty soon, humans can't defend themselves against anything. Even a mild cold could be seriously harmful. It's fine for now. There are no germs or anything on board. But what's going to happen later on down the road? On the ship, millions of plants grow in special greenhouses with water and ultraviolet light. The plants produce oxygen and spread it through the entire ship. Of course, it's not enough oxygen to satisfy millions, but it helps people remember the planet they left behind. After centuries of living on spaceships, humans have adapted to the new conditions and almost stopped breathing. Lungs have disappeared almost completely, and humans are starting to develop other ways of getting oxygen, from water, from liquid oxygen tanks, we're becoming a totally new species. But it's not all bad. Genetic engineering is developing every year. Full-fledged life support suits are created. They help with movement, strength, speed, vision, hearing, even speech. People's voices get so weak they can only speak in whispers. Luckily, the suits have built-in microphones and speakers. There's no food anymore, just specially created liquids. After all that time in space, the human stomach can't digest anything anyway. Fancy a handful of peanuts or a small cracker? Forget it! In the beginning, the special space food had loads of flavor. But over time, people sort of forgot what things were supposed to taste like. Eventually, they stopped adding in flavorings, and because of this new tasteless food, tongue receptors stopped working. Soon, people lost all sense of taste. For some people, this life seems unbearable, but they have a choice. They can just slide on into a cryogenic capsule for millions of years. Then it's just a matter of a quick defrost when the ships finally arrive. But it's seriously risky to be frozen for such a long time. There's no guarantee that the ships won't crash into a huge meteorite, or worse. People start to take a different approach. They upload their consciousness to a central computer. It's safer and requires much less power. And when you wake up, you can just download your mind into a new modified human suit. Some people decide to stay awake and live a, quote, normal life. Thousands of years pass, then millions. Humans look really different now. All their limbs are now artificial, and the exoskeletons they wear are controlled by mind power. With each passing millennium, arms, neck, legs, and spines, they become smaller and smaller. Brittle bones soon dissolve into nothingness. Eyes, nose, and mouths disappear. The brain isn't protected by a skull anymore, it's just surrounded by soft skin. Only consciousness remains. Nowadays, a human is a powerful high-tech robot ruled over by a small pulsating bag filled with a brain. It's been a few million years since humans left Earth. All the ship's inhabitants have already forgotten that their species was born on a planet with gravity. The history of life on Earth has become a myth, an ancient legend. Most people believe that these ships are their true homes, always have been. That's why, when humans finally reach their destination, no one's that eager to get off and have a walk around. Life on a new, unknown planet seems like a huge pain in the spacesuit. Gravity, air, bacteria, germs – it takes several thousand years of evolution for humanity to get used to these new conditions. Luckily, humans have a secret weapon – technology. At this point, all humans are downloaded from the central computer into new robot suits. People face a choice – get off the ship and make this planet their new home, or stay and live on the ships. Those that stay on the ships set off into the expanses of space to explore the galaxy and discover new worlds. Those who decide to stay on the new planet have to adapt to the new conditions. It's pretty different from Earth. There's a different air density, different weather patterns, and strange new chemical elements. It will take another million years before these robo-brain sacs take on a new shape. One day, these distant human descendants will want to research their origins. They'll invent a ship that can jump through space and time. The research will lead them to the distant past, to the small planet Earth, to now. This might sound crazy, but just imagine that tomorrow someone lands in your backyard and they're your descendants from the future. Those passengers who stayed on the ships will probably find new planets and maybe decide to stay on some of them. Their bodies will change and adapt too. So, in billions of years, the universe will be inhabited by different amazing creatures that all have something in common. They were all humans once. Now, on average, Earth's water rises by 14/100ths of an inch each year, and sometimes I feel like, getting some floaties. So, we can't help but wonder, what if we end up living underwater? We now have evidence that humans could adapt to that. The Baiju, a group of people living in Southeast Asia, have evolved to have enlarged spleens, and the spleen is the organ that stores oxygen-rich red blood cells. When these cells are released into the bloodstream, they enable divers to hold their breath underwater for longer periods of time. This allows the Beiju people to free dive to depths up to 230 feet. To live underwater, our bodies would have to get bigger so that we could limit heat loss. The bigger the animals, the more heat it produces. We'd also need to grow webbed fingers and toes to navigate the deep sea. Eventually, we wouldn't need to have two legs, and they'd fuse together. Our eyes might also get bigger for better vision. Come to think of it, we'd end up looking like mer people. Scientists have even looked into the possibility of people being able to fly. Flying creatures have the right body size and the right metabolism for that. We'd need to have the ability to use fuel, like the food and water we consume, to produce enough energy to lift ourselves off the ground. Birds, for example, have a very high metabolism. All processes in their bodies go much faster. A hummingbird's heart can beat up to 1,200 times per minute. A human athlete's heart can only go as fast as 220 beats per minute. So, the flight seems almost impossible. There's no selective pressure on our species to grow wings and learn to fly. Plus, to do it, we'd need to be smaller, have less dense bones, and lose most of our muscle mass. We'd also have to give up on our teeth to become light enough. I ain't giving up my teeth. If our arms became wings, we wouldn't be able to do the things we needed our hands for. We'd just become clumsier visions of ourselves. I don't have that far to go. And to grow separate wings, our skeleton and muscle structure would need to radically change over millions of years. The concept of humans living on other planets of our solar system doesn't seem very far-fetched. Depending on what planet we'll end up colonizing, our features will become a lot different too. Our eyes will get larger if we reach planets at a bigger distance from the Sun than Earth. Because if there's less light, we'll need bigger eyes to see better. Our skin might also become more pigmented to help with harmful UV radiation outside of Earth's protective ozone layer. We might even get thicker eyelids and more pronounced brow bones to deal with the effects of cosmic rays. Weirdly enough, if that wasn't weird enough, we might evolve to blink sideways to better protect our eyes from cosmic debris coming from all directions, since most likely, gravity on other planets will be weaker than on Earth. Living on other planets might also mean bigger nostrils. We'll need those to breathe more easily since oxygen may be scarce in new worlds. We might get thicker and denser hair to protect our heads from potential radiation. On Mars, for example, there's on average 40 to 50 times more radiation than on Earth. We will still be able to use a lot of technology, but instead of smartwatches and glasses, we'll have smaller and more subtle gadgets. Things like communication contact lenses might appear quite soon. Instead of headphones, we might use miniature bone conduction devices implanted above the ear. Scientists don't know for sure what people will look like 1,000 years from now, but they can predict it based on previous patterns of evolution. In the Middle Ages, people had an average life expectancy of 35 years. That means they had to work really hard and produce offspring very early in their lives. These days, life expectancy has more than doubled. More and more people live to be 100 or even 110 years old. We can easily assume we'll end up living longer than that. Now, how about our size? All animals have evolved to grow larger over time. We've seen it in dinosaurs, whales, horses, and in people too. Our ancestors from 4 million years ago were small, barely reaching 4 to 5 feet tall. Most likely, we continue to gain height mostly because we have better nutrition, but also because our genes seem to be evolving too, as people who are above average in height tend to have more adventurous or useful genes based on some studies. But as we grow taller, we've also become more fragile. Over the past 2 million years, our skeletons have become lighter. We've started to use more tools for our day-to-day activities. People have also become less active ever since farming was invented, so our bones are now less dense. And because these days we spend a lot of time at our desks, our bone structure might change altogether and alter our postures. Yet, the taller body trend can't go on forever. Size cannot increase beyond a certain limit. That's because the pressure on the tissues of very large bodies is different from the pressure on bodies of medium size. If our bodies continue to grow larger, our shape will need to change too. We're also likely to see dramatic changes in our minds and personalities. The past 6 million years have roughly tripled our brain size. You might think this trend will continue, but it probably won't. Surprisingly, our brains are getting smaller. Research shows that the size of the human brain peaked about 20,000 years ago, just before the invention of farming. Then the brain started to decrease, and we're not really sure why. One explanation is that fat and proteins were hard to find once people started farming and eating more vegetables. It made it more difficult to grow and maintain large brains. Our brains also need a lot of energy. They take up around 20% of our daily energy use. Our personalities are continuing to evolve too. We don't need to be as aggressive as ancient hunters and gatherers. Our social interactions are also different. Back in the day, people couldn't travel far or communicate over long distances efficiently. So the close relationships they had were members of their own local group or tribe. Now, we can travel all over the world, speak on the phone, chat on our laptops, switch jobs as often as we need to, and even date people online. It pushed us to be more outgoing, open, and tolerant. It also made us more adaptable to different cultures from around the world. There used to be 9 human species roaming Earth about 300,000 years ago. The other 8 species probably went extinct due to climate changes. It may just be us for now, but who's to say there won't be a new human species? But since we're not separated by physical distance anymore, that's unlikely. To have different species, people need to evolve in isolated groups. Genetics call the phenomenon occurring now the grand averaging. We're becoming more and more alike as generations go by. The world population is mixed. People no longer reproduce just within their location. If enough time goes by, the human race will start to look homogeneous. We'll all become the average of different physical appearances we see today. We used to have bigger jaws so that we could better chew on processed food. These days, we have smaller jaws and less room for all 32 teeth. That's why we often have those pesky wisdom teeth removed. Scientists say the number of teeth we have won't change. But if we continue to change our eating habits, switching to even softer food, our jaws will become smaller and our teeth even more crowded. So I say, let's break out the peanut brittle. Are our thumbs becoming larger? Some data suggests some teenagers have overdeveloped thumbs. That's because they play too many video games. Their thumb muscles have adapted because they've been used a lot. But this is not a genetic trait. One person may have a larger thumb, but they won't pass it on to future generations. You know, someday well into the future, we might be all thumbs. Hey, I'm there already. The human body is this perfectly balanced machine, right? Well, not when I'm using it. Normally, all its parts work seamlessly together to keep us thriving and, well, alive. Each of our organs is essential for our day-to-day activities, from breathing, walking, talking, and coming up with bright ideas that push humanity forward. But are they really essential? Do we really need all those body parts, or are some of them just ancient relics that we just got stuck with in this weird game of evolution? Take wisdom teeth, for example. Nah, somebody already took mine. Yeah, they're those pairs of teeth stuck in the back of your mouth you often have to go to the dentist for. They're also known as third molars, and while they can be used to chew food, a lot of people think they're just unnecessary. And get this, around 22% of people worldwide don't even have all 4 of them. When they do grow in, they're the most likely to become impacted, which means they get stuck in the jawbone sideways and can't properly come through the gums. It's all because our jaws are often too small to accommodate these extra guys. Some smart scientists think that's because we've evolved to have smaller jaws over time. Recent evidence also shows that what we eat as kids might also be to blame, but it's hard to know for sure. Apparently, munching on hard-to-chew foods like raw veggies and nuts can actually stimulate jaw growth, while eating soft processed foods can kinda stunt it. And that leaves little space for our back teeth to come in and, do their thing. Will they disappear altogether in the future? I guess we human mammals will just have to wait and see. Now let's talk about the vomeral nasal organ, or as I like to call it, the nose's secret instrument. Ooh. You see, rodents and other mammals have this awesome ability to communicate with each other using chemical signals called pheromones. And guess what? They have a special organ called the vomeral nasal organ, or VNO, that helps them detect these pheromones. Here's where it gets interesting. While most adult humans have something resembling a VNO in their nose, it turns out that it's basically a useless remnant. Neuroscientists even say that if you look at the anatomy of this organ, you won't see any cells that resemble those of similar organs from other mammals. Also, this organ in humans doesn't seem to be communicating with the brain either. Now, it's not all bad news. Even though the human VNO is pretty useless, it looks like it still might respond to some pheromones. Will humans keep this organ on their evolutionary to-do list? For now, I'd place it in the maybe pile. Now, here's a tail. Animals that feature tails need these structures for a lot of things. Some need it for balance, others for navigation, while some need it to attract potential partners. But did you know that when we're just a few weeks old in our mother's belly, we actually have tails too? That's right, we have a whole little tail complete with vertebrae. As we develop, that tail magically disappears and we're left with our trusty tailbone. Humans and apes are unique in that we don't have tails, unlike other primates. It's a mystery why apes lost their tails, but we can all agree that it makes us stand out in a crowd. However, once in a blue moon, a human is born with a little vestigial tail. Cute, right? Well, don't get too excited, because these tails don't have vertebrae and can sometimes be associated with a tricky condition of the spine. Either way, these tails are usually harmless and can be easily removed with a quick surgery. And let's be honest, it's not like we're going to miss it. After all, who needs a tail when you have arms and legs to get around? Plus, can you imagine trying to find pants that fit with a tail sticking out the back? Not a good look. There's little to no chance humans will end up needing tails in the future, so I'm guessing the tailbones are bye-bye in future generations. Humans also have a funny little fold of membrane in the inner corner of the eyes, called the plica semilunaris. It's basically what's left of a third eyelid, which is still found in some animals, like gorillas and other primates. But here's the funny thing. Even our close relatives, the chimpanzees, have this little fold that appears to be useless too. So we're not alone in this eye quirkiness. Speaking of unusual membranes, they serve a variety of functions in different animals, such as protecting the eye from dirt and moisture, or hiding the iris from predators. Some species can even see through their transparent membranes when they're underwater or underground. Now, the reasons why we humans lost our third eyelid is still a bit of a mystery. Maybe changes in our habitat and eye physiology made it unnecessary, or maybe we just evolved to be too cool for a third eyelid. Who knows? With or without vestigial organs, it's interesting to imagine what humans might look like in the future. Many organs have become obsolete because of our lifestyle changes. Care to have a peek into what we might look like in the future? And in the same vein, or artery, have you heard of the concept of text claw? It's where you spend so much time typing on your phone or laptop that your hand starts to cramp up like a claw. And that's just one of the physical changes that could happen to us if we don't take care of our bodies in this tech-heavy world. But it's not just our hands that are affected. We could end up with 90-degree elbows from constantly holding our devices at that angle, and even a smaller brain from all the distractions and information overload. Now, I know what you're thinking. We just can't give up technology and go back to the Stone Age. And you're right, we don't have to. But we do need to be aware of the potential negative effects and take steps to reduce their damage. That's why a team of designers put their creative efforts together to present Mindy, a future human whose body has physically changed due to the constant and never-ending use of smartphones, laptops, and other types of maniacal devices. While Mindy's exaggerated changes may not be in our future, the concerns behind them are real. So, what can we do? Well, one suggestion is to take regular breaks from our screens and stretch our legs a little. Maybe even encourage some office yoga or dance parties to get the blood flowing. We don't have to give up technology completely, but we do need to be mindful of its effects on our bodies and minds. Many years in the future, we might even get smaller in size. One scientist reckons that if we were smaller, our bodies would need less energy, which would come in super handy in our increasingly crowded planet. It's funny to think about how different our lives are now compared to when we were hunter-gatherers. Back then, we only had to interact with a handful of people each day. But now, remembering people's names is a super important trait, and it might even be something we grow to become better at. Or, technology might actually play a role in our evolution. Scientists believe that we could one day have implants in our brains that help us remember people's names. It's like having a biological phone book directly in your body. Wouldn't that be cool? Who knows? Maybe in the future, we'll even have visible technology as part of our appearance. Imagine having an artificial eye that can see different colors and visuals. And don't even get me started on what we might look like if we colonize Mars. With the lower gravity, our bodies could change in all sorts of ways. We might have longer arms and legs, or even insulating body hair like our Neanderthal ancestors. It's hard to pinpoint what we might look like in the future without very precise data to back the models up. But it's fair to say these changes will be interesting, to say the least. As for me, well, it's too late to say the least. I've said over 1,400 words here already.